Good morning, good morning. Believe it or not, this is the second to the last brunch. And we are finishing in style with our two rabbis. Today we have Rabbi Tina, who is going to talk about Neurodivergent Torah. If you read the tidbits, she gave us an intro. I would ask her to kind of go over that again. And then on the 27th of April is going to be Rabbi Karen. And so without further ado, Rabbi Tina, take it away. There are handouts on your table.
So, yes, oh, that's very loud. Is that better? Excellent. Now I don't feel like I'm yelling at you. So who read tidbits? Oh wow, more of you read tidbits than I think. I said, who read tidbits?
I didn't.
So I'm not assuming anybody read tidbits, but nice to know. For those of you that were honest. Or not, I guess, I don't know, you could be lying to me.
Tidbits.
Tidbits, you know, like that email we write stuff for and send out each week, yeah.
Yeah.
I think more of you read tidbits than my religious school parents do the newsletter.
I do both.
You do both. Now say, this little crew of religious school parents, you're not counted in that statement. No, I love our religious school families. I regularly tease my husband because he does not read the newsletter and never knows what's going on. So today, it's always fun to choose a Ryterband topic over a year in advance and then pray that it's still relevant when we get there. So I will define, what did I actually call this? Neurodiverse. I don't remember what I called it. I will come back to that term in a moment, but really where this came from is over the last couple of years, particularly in Talmud class, sometimes in Torah study, that I sort of shared the joke that I thoroughly believe the Talmud was in essence created by a bunch of ADHD rabbis. And that's only somewhat of a joke, and I've gotten mixed responses to that. And so in one way, this whole session is an answer to why I think that's sort of a joke and sort of not. And then I heard from a couple people that either they or they heard somebody saying they were interested in coming today because they didn't even know what that word neurodiverse in the title meant. Well, when I was told they didn't understand part of the title, I'm assuming that was not the Torah. But so what today is ideally an introduction into both neurodiversity as a concept and then how that applies to Torah and how we understand Torah and study Torah. What it is not is an attempt to armchair diagnose our sages, ourselves, or me. Particularly that last one, that'll be the conversation after Ryterband. So, how many of you have heard any one of those 5 terms? How many of you have not heard at least one of those terms or know what they mean? So hands up for everything, awesome. So, what? So ADHD falls under neurodiversity, so that's fully welcome in this room, and I like I've done any and all rabbit holes. So I'm assuming we know the prefix neuro meaning having to do with our brain, our cognitive function, what's going on here, or not. Up till, I'm gonna say about a few years ago, and I'm bringing most of this to you from my lens of being in Jewish education and conversations I've had predominantly with educators, is that probably Danielle, I'm looking at you because you may have the timeline as well as I do, like in the last 5-10 years, the terms neurotypical and neurodivergent sort of became more common, at least in education circles. I would roughly say neurotypical or normal, right? Like typical processing going on here is roughly the kind of traits of how we think about things and function in the world that were successful in a traditional classroom setting when most of you all were in K-12. Like you could sit at your desk, you could study a list, you did well on those standardized tests. That was what school was geared towards. And basically neurodivergent is therefore everybody else that doesn't fit that mold or can't pass as fitting that mold. There was a meme that went around social media a few years back that was like, if you were in the gifted program in elementary school, how is your anxiety and undiagnosed ADHD doing? So that description isn't entirely accurate as far as what neurotypical is. How many of you have heard of like different types of learners? Like, oh, I'm a visual learner, I'm a kinesthetic learner, I'm a this. That was kind of the start of this, was the realization that we don't all learn best by sitting at a table and having somebody talk at us. Or for our younger counterparts, sitting at a desk and having a teacher talk at them. Was sort of the start of this. The challenge, or why I try to stay away from using these first two terms, neurotypical and neurodivergent, is it implies one is normal and one is abnormal. So when we go from divergent to diverse, the idea is that it's understanding the way we think and function and learn as not even a spectrum, but a constellation of traits that are all in and of themselves part of normal human being in the world, but are different. So if I were, you know I love analogies, if I were to use height as an analogy, we could say that the average or the typical height for women, I think, is about like 5'3" to 5'6", I don't know, I'm making up numbers. And that somebody who is of atypical height is shorter or taller than that. My husband is taller than me. It's very convenient when we go grocery shopping or trying to put things up on the high shelves. It's very inconvenient for him when there's low ceilings. It's not to say one height is better or worse than the other, but you know, if we've got the standard bell curve thing, we all fall on it somewhere. So when we use the term neurodiverse instead of neurodivergent, it normalizes that there isn't a common, a normal, and an abnormal, but this wide array. In the same way we've got an array of height and hair color and weight and all the other things. So then we get to what up until about a week ago was one of my favorite terms, was neurospicy. Which sort of came from those who didn't like the term neurodivergent to refer to those that do deviate from kind of the average a little bit more, who like spicy food. Oh, come on, some of you have to like spicy food. Who likes their food more bland? Who just said, oh, no.
I like it in the middle.
Who likes it kind of somewhere in the middle, right? Like there's a reason when I go to Indian for lunch most Thursdays, they ask me, do I want my food on a scale of 1 or 0 to 5, right? Same idea. When we look at this constellation of stuff that I'm going to tell you what that constellation actually is in a moment, some of us might really like cinnamon and really dislike cumin, or what is it, cilantro, that some people really like and some say tastes like soap. Is one better or worse? I guess it depends on how much cilantro is in your food. So that neurospicy kind of was, I think, an attempt to take out the sort of judgment layer and express neurodiverse in a different way. And as I was preparing the slides for today, I came across the term neurospiky, which I'll get to because there's an image that explains that one better. Any questions to hear? Liars.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's sort of like racism. If you're white, you're neurotypical, if you're not white, you're neurodivergent, but not neurodivergent.
But, right, so for those, since I have a microphone and you don't, when we think about race, a lot of this comes down to, and I was psych in undergrad, which means I know just enough of the psychology behind this to be dangerous, but not enough to actually say anything that you shouldn't fact check me on. Our way of functioning in the world is, by and large, we assume everybody else thinks like us. Because how often do we stop and talk with others about how we think? Also, PS, this is the image for neurospiky that kind of like sets up the different. So when I'm saying this constellation of how we communicate verbally, how we communicate non-verbally, just at CCAR this last week, I had at least 2 people ask me, oh, you know ASL? And I'm like, no, I just can't talk without using my hands. How we process visual stuff, how we think about our social cognition, our how we interact with others. Different types of memory are along the bottom there, our fine motor and gross motor coordination, like AKA, how klutzy are you? How sensitive to sensory input you are. There are those of us that seek sensory input, like you put us in a quiet room, we're gonna go nuts. And there are other people that you put them in a room with 450 rabbis and they go nuts. And then response inhibition, which is roughly when there's a distraction, how do I have to respond to that distraction before coming back? If I want to do something, the impulse control, that kind of falls in there. And so if we were to talk about neurotypical, which this is claiming to be on the black, you sort of see it forms a nice little, mostly circle that's kind of average all around. And so then neurospiky is because we're stronger in some categories and weaker in others. And so you get those points instead of just a blob. Does that sort of make sense? Going back to what I was saying before, so we can look at this in terms of the individual categories, but here is one quick example to sort of make the point of why I think this is important for us to talk about as adults, as leaders, as educators in our congregation. I'm going to go to the visual processing thing because that's the best category here. We don't talk about how we think. We just assume everybody thinks the way we do. I said that before. If I ask you to close your eyes, some of you know where I'm going with this, and picture an apple, how many of you actually see like a nice little red apple with a stem, maybe a little leaf, maybe it's got a bite out of it, maybe it's got a worm taken out of it? You don't actually have to raise your hands.
I was gonna say my apple's green.
Oh, your apple's green. Well, you're weird. So when I close my eyes and I am asked to picture something, it is black. I literally thought like seeing things with your mind's eye was just a lovely figure of speech. Well, it turns out some of you can actually see things, and I'm the odd one that kind of can't. And that exists on a spectrum. Maybe for some of you, it's like a little like chalkboard drawing or like a fuzzy picture. And for some of you, it's like literally a picture of an apple. This blew my mind about 7 years ago. Also, it explains why I'm absolutely terrible with remembering names because I cannot see your faces in my head. What?
I didn't realize why I don't remember names.
Uh-huh.
Because I don't.
So who just had a mind blown moment? Thank you. Go look up aphantasia. Where are my aphantasia folks? Yeah. So this was kind of, it was 2020, so it was during the height of the pandemic that I found some clickbait article on Facebook about it, right? It blew my mind because I just assumed all of this stuff about visualization, like, I can tell you, okay, an apple is red and it's like, but then it's why I have to talk with my hands because I can't picture the apple. I'm putting it right here so that it's in front of me and now I can see it. That would kind of fall under this neurodiverse model. In addition to your things like ADHD and autism and stuff that probably or maybe came to mind when I gave this title. So in terms of diagnoses, and I don't know if I actually made that big enough for you all to read,
Turn on the lights, maybe, he was just so pale.
Rick, can you take care of that? So you've got your autism, your anxiety, your ADHD, your OCD, things that you might think of fall under this, but also different types of learning disabilities, genetic things, cerebral palsy, et cetera, et cetera. The point of this slide is not necessarily that you can read all of those, but that you see there's a lot of stuff that falls under it. With neurodiversity, it's thinking about, do you think in patterns, images, concepts? Do you see the forest or the trees? Do you start with the big picture and mind down? Do you start with all the nitpicky little details to build the big picture? Can you focus on one thing at a time? Do you juggle lots of things? Do you try and focus on one thing at a time and then get distracted by all the other little things that people are juggling? I'm happy to share these slides with anybody that wants. I made sure to use all the images with Creative Commons licenses so that it can go on YouTube. Do you make connections that I apparently mistyped based on logic and or emotion and or something else? How do you respond to distractions? And this one's close to my heart because I have a child with ADHD. What motivates you, whether you are interested or invested in the thing or not? There's a how interested am I, how intrinsically motivated am I to do the thing, and how urgent or important is the thing. I may really not want to do my homework, but I know it's due tomorrow. Can I do the homework? Like, how we balance those things. That all goes into this. So that's sort of your introduction to neurodiversity. Questions up to here. Literally just spent, what, like 15 minutes on something that could be probably an entire college course. So how does that affect how we look at Torah? And at the top of your handout, we're not going to read the whole thing. The next couple slides come from where I excerpted that top 2 paragraphs from. That this is a lens of how we understand Torah, meaning both the 5 books of the Bible, but also Torah in the Jewish sense of all of Jewish life and learning. Who here participated in the Torah Queries class? Many of you. So just as that book looked at the Torah through a queer lens, it's the same idea. That book didn't make every biblical character queer. Maybe at points in there, maybe talked about, oh, would this person have identified as LGBTQ if that was okay in biblical times? And that's where you start bordering on that armchair diagnosing. To be clear, for neurodiversity, not LGBTQ, not a diagnosis, but that armchair, I should say, that armchair identifying, putting these labels on characters that all we have is what the text tells us. And let me tell you, the Torah was not interested in telling you if somebody was LGBTQ or ADHD or autistic or like, right? Those words didn't necessarily exist either. So it's, look, and I believe the Torah Queries book, all of the authors identified as queer. I'm seeing nods, so I think I'm accurate in that. For neurodiverse Torah, and this is in that blurb that we aren't reading, it's essentially Devar Torahs and commentaries on Torah written by folks who self-define as neurodiverse or neurospicy or neurospiky. But you don't have to be. You can still look at that in the same way I can imagine reading the Torah as a man, even though I am female. I can imagine what a mind that thinks differently than me might say about this text, even if I don't identify as that. And I think there is something, especially for those who identify as neurospicy, that's gonna be my favorite term, in wondering, were some of these biblical characters like me? One of the things we know is and I said this at one point and got some pushback, there is research to suggest that in the same way that Ashkenazic Jewish heritage predisposes us to certain genetic conditions, because there is a genetic component to autism and ADHD, I looked more at ADHD, there is research that says there are a higher prevalence of ADHD diagnoses among Ashkenazic origin Jews. Yeah.
Saying this, there was a very interesting researcher in neurology and psychiatry. I think she's dead now, but she said mankind would have survived if they were not neurodivergent people, because they were the people that went ahead. And since you're looking at the history of Judaism and all the people, what they had to overcome, what obstacles, it makes total sense that there are more people that are neurodivergent because we need creative thinkers to overcome obstacles.
So to summarize and correct me if I'm wrong, the fact that neurodiversity exists protects the human race because we think differently. In the same way, who's a night owl? Who's a morning person? Who's neither of the above, don't worry. If we were all night owls, we'd endanger our community during the day when we wanted to sleep. If we were all morning people, we'd endanger our community to predators in the nighttime. By having both, we've got people who are kind of awake and functional throughout the day. So somebody can stand guard on third shift and first shift. We need it. When I give talks to elementary schools around Hanukkah, I say, if we all thought and believed and had the same favorite color, and I put it in really simple terms for them, the world would be a really boring place. So this is what keeps things, and that's also where I like the spiciness, like it keeps things interesting. So I looked up, and I did not put this in the slides because it did not have a Creative Commons license, but this comes from a group called Sunshine Support, and it lists the positive attributes of being autistic. And I'll pause to say, these are identities. And so there was a push to use people first language. So I am a person with autism versus an autistic person. Neither of those actually applies to me. Which is preferred? It depends on the person. Some people like, I'm a person with blank, or I'm a blank person. I'm a female rabbi or a rabbi that happens to be female. Which identity do I want to put out there first? So you'll see in a moment, like the autistic Rebbitzin, she puts it first. Others want you to see them as a person, and then this is the diagnosis that helps you understand how I function in the world. Characteristically, and autism very much is a spectrum. This does not apply to everybody. We're, as always, using lots of overgeneralizations, oversimplifications. Those with autism tend to pay particular attention to detail. Who's gotten bored in services as we talk about the size and how much gold went into this part of the tabernacle and it was this many cubits? Stereotypically, those with autism loved that part of the Torah. They are often on time because that attention to detail, they're going to think about, okay, what time do I need to be there and how long is it going to take me to get there and until something goes wrong, and then they're like, there's an ability to hyper-focus, to really get really deep down that rabbit hole. Many of the students that I work with that have autism, like, can tell me, there was one child I worked with on a swim team who could tell me every musician that had that was a one-hit wonder. Who they were, what song it was, what year it was, like, top charts. He was 7. And that often leads to a dedication to special interests. They often have a unique sense of humor. They're often very direct, honest, front, like they say what they mean. There's no sugarcoating, there's no talking between the lines, which sometimes gets you in trouble in social situations, but can also be a very valuable thing. Those of you who are willing to come up to me after a sermon and be like, hey, Rabbi, that really wasn't your best one, I appreciate. Because trust me, not every sermon hits it out of the park, right? Like, so if all I ever get after services is, oh, that was a nice sermon, Rabbi, that was a nice sermon, Rabbi, like that's really actually, I mean, it makes me feel good, but it's not really helpful for writing better sermons. They often have strong moral compasses. So if I internally believe lying is wrong, I'm gonna stick with that 100%. That's half the list. So you can see in terms of communal functioning, having people that think this way in our midst is really helpful. Not great in every social interaction. The same things that can essentially be their superpowers can also be a detriment. And ideally, neurodiversity helps us see how we can use those as strengths and provide additional support in situations where that is a challenge. I shared a video on Facebook for those that are friends with me. If you're not, you've got to friend me, I don't go out and find you. Of a high school graduation where there was a child that was graduating with significant autism and within that, significant sensory sensitivities. So the idea of being in a room with everybody and you gotta wear the cap and the itchy gown, right? This was already a lot for that child. And so everybody, like all the noise and the clapping and the cheering was not something the student would be able to withstand. And so the video is the principal of the school getting up at the beginning and saying, here's what's gonna happen. Instead of doing things alphabetically or whatever their tradition was, we are going to call this student first. Nobody's going to clap, nobody's going to cheer. And so then after his little spiel, they call the student, he walks up, like plugging his ears. They say his name, he gets his diploma, all of his classmates stand up and do like very silent, quiet shows of support. And then he is able to leave the ceremony and they continue on as normal. Some of the comments were, this is amazing, look what this principal did for this child. Some of the comments were, this shouldn't stand out. This should be normal. We should give all graduates the option of a sensory-friendly graduation. What would that look like? I saw that earlier this week, so it was on my mind. But how do we give supports to give experiences and to give participation to the full spectrum of life, and whether that's how we think, whether that's how we feel about things, political views, whatever, like, right? Everything is a spectrum. So, back to the topic at hand. So if this video plays embedded, that would be awesome.
I'm Leah Ahama, and I am an autistic rabbit. April is Autism Acceptance Month, so that means you might be seeing more autism-related content.
Can you all hear it?
Put the microphone by.
I could be making a video on any of the hot topics that the rest of the autistic community burns out over, but I don't feel that I have much to add to these conversations that hasn't already been said in previous years and won't be said again this year by other creators. If you're curious about those topics, I'll link a playlist of autistic creators talking about autism descriptions, so you can go check that out. Instead, I want to introduce you all to the most famous autistic in Jewish history. I thought that I could do this in just one video, but when the source list passed the 2-page mark and I was still only looking at the Tanakh, I knew that it had to be a series. This person has it all: sensory differences, social and relationship differences, communication differences, and self-perception differences that are super relatable to autistic Jews today. So, who is it? Our very own Moshe Rabbi. What? Moses? The guy who led the entire Jewish people out of slavery? The greatest prophet to ever live? You're saying Moses is autistic? Heresy! Blasphemy! Nope. I'm coming to you this Autism Acceptance Month to tell you why the narrative of the Torah only makes sense if Moshe is autistic. In this video, I'm going to focus on traits that relate to Moshe's sensory experience. I'm starting here because what I have to say about his interpersonal relationships and his sense of self is too in-depth to share airtime with the series intro. Instead of diving in head first, come and take full steps with me and get used to the water. If you don't want to miss the videos on the other topics, please do subscribe to my channel.
Or follow the QR codes I put on our handout.
Of this video, I'm going to break the information that we're going over about Moshe's sensory experience down into 3 categories: perception, processing, and response. The Tanakh is famously verbose on subjects that we aren't meant to read much into, and brief on subjects we're meant to consider carefully. We know Moshe is capable of having entire conversations with Hashem, while the rest of the people can't. We know that a component of this is sensory in nature. From the moment they very first interact in Shemot 3, Moshe is able to perceive Hashem's voice in a way that is clear, but not painful. They can talk, they can argue. Contrast this with people begging not to have to hear Hashem's voice at all, personally, in Shemot 20, and there's something that's clearly different about Moshe. If this was the only thing setting Moshe apart from everyone else, it would be easy to chalk that up to the purpose of being a prophet. But of course, there's more going on. Let's jump over to sensory and information processing. Moshe's feelings hit him hard, and we see him experience sensory overload. In Midbar 14, he's so upset by the spy slanderous report on the land of Israel and the chaos that follows that he falls to the floor. This is a guy who has no problem arguing one-on-one with Hashem, but when too many people are doing and saying too many stressful things at once, he can't handle it. This might feel pretty relatable to a subset of autistics who are perfectly happy blasting heavy metal music in their headphones, but experience pain from the accumulation of everyday sounds going on, or would be at risk for a meltdown if they were situated between 2 active conversations at a Shabbat table. Finding resources for Moshe's perception and internal processing of sensory input in a Bronze Age text and its commentaries takes quite a bit of digging and pattern recognition. But much like how the DSM is better at describing what autistic behaviors look like from the outside than how autistic experience feels on the inside, the Tanakh more thoroughly captures the behavioral consequences of Moshe's sensory and emotional differences than what's going on beneath them. Autistics can have a wide range of coping mechanisms for dealing with environmental stress, but Moshe doesn't seem to have been taught any that are sufficient for his needs. As a result, he has a great difficulty managing his temper. His outbursts become less violent as he matures, but that's not saying much when you remember that in Shemot 2, Moshe straight up kills a guy. Yes, that guy was beating a Hebrew slave at the time, but that doesn't make Moshe a sanctioned executioner. Neither does Moshe's traumatic upbringing that we will talk about in a future video. While he never strikes another person, Moshe does continue to have physical and verbal outbursts when he's overwhelmed by either too much input at once or input that's too painful for him to process. In Shemot 32, Moshe is so overcome by rage at the sight of the people worshiping the golden calf that he smashes the luchot that he just spent 40 days and nights receiving from Hashem. I gotta say, I feel for him here. When I'm overwhelmed, it often feels like an almost palpable energy is building up under my skin and will explode out of my hands like a regeneration on Doctor Who. I've wanted to throw porcelain across the room, and that's without spending over a month alone on a sandy little mountain and having no bodily functions in order to receive a holy and perfect set of sapphire tablets telling the chosen people not to worship idols, only to go down the mountain and find my brother leading that very people in idol worship. Moshe's overwhelm comes in both acute and chronic varieties. From the moment he returns from Midian to free the Israelites, they are always catching and blaming him for their own pessimism and unmet expectations. Whenever things start to look bleak, the people blame Moshe instead of turning to their own resourcefulness or even praying to Hashem. Whether they're about to be attacked by an army, bored of eating matzah all the time, it's always, bored of eating manna all the time, it's always Moshe and often also Hashem's fault for taking them out of Egypt in the first place. In return, impolite descriptors that Moshe uses for the Israelites, either directly to them or in conversations with Hashem, include stiff-necked, stubborn, kvetchy, judgmental, quarrelsome, and burdensome. The final straw comes in Midbar 20, when Moshe is mourning the loss of his sister Miriam. For those who don't know, Miriam is a prophetess in her own right, and it is by her great merits that a stone had been producing water for the people to drink in the desert. With her gone, Miriam's well dries up. Instead of having any faith that the God who brought them out of Egypt and kept them alive this long would find a way to keep doing so, the Israelites lash out at Moshe and Aharon in the verse immediately after they just buried their sister. Pretty rough, right? Moshe asks Hashem what he should do, and he says the two brothers should command the rock that had been Miriam's well to give the people water, and it would do so. Aaron is going along with this plan, but Moshe changes course fast. Instead of displaying his rod and speaking to the rock, he taunts the Israelites, calls them rebels, and strikes the rock with the rod twice to produce the water. To put it another way, in the absence of healthier coping mechanisms, Moshe responds to the combination of overwhelming grief and accumulated bullying by beating up a rock instead of possibly hurting a person. An improvement over the Egyptian, but violence against inanimate objects in place of people is still an abusive behavior that Hashem punishes by forbidding him to enter Eretz Yisrael. No matter how overwhelmed he is, and no matter what emotional tools he lacks, Moshe is a prophet, and as such, he is obligated to put his own best face forward so that the Israelites don't confuse his personal feelings with Hashem's disposition toward them. In other words, the burden of the prophet is to mask. We don't see how much Moshe succeeded on this front. We're only given his failures. Much like the struggles of autistics today are not seen when we mask, but our differences that neurotypicals label as deficits are always noticed when we fail. Thank you for watching the first video in my new Autistic series. I want to thank my husband and autistic Rabbi, as well as another.
I encourage you to watch the last minute where she thanks people and tells you where to go from there, but we're gonna skip it. No, stop. All right, go on to the next slide before it can play again. So she does have two other videos that are lengthier than that, about 8-minute clip. I encourage you to watch them. There are QR codes on the handouts, or Autistic Robinson on YouTube. It's not that hard to find. So now is where you all get to do some of the talking. Instead of trying to summarize that video, I wanted to watch it so that you heard it from her own words. What I've given you in the handouts that I did not keep a copy of, the first page, well, I can see the first page there, we're good, is, as I mentioned, the source where I kind of gave you that quick definition of what is neurodiversity and what it isn't. At the bottom is a little graphic that has 8 different traits that are common of those with autism. Again, autism is a spectrum. Not every person who has autism is going to express all of these, or in the same degrees. And the other piece that I wanted to clarify, because as I played this video for you, the speaker used the term to mask. And I don't know outside of education context if that is a known term or not, but it's the idea of basically trying to pass as a neurotypical. So I can be, just as I can be an introvert and still speak in front of a group, like I can be overwhelmed by sensory input and suck it up and participate. That's the idea of masking, that you're sort of hiding your true self to fit in. And when somebody masks, so it's a way of getting away from the like low functioning, high functioning autism for those that know that terminology. Because high functioning isn't really that, it implies you're almost more normal, but really somebody that we would 5 years ago have said was high functioning is really just high masking. Their autism doesn't go away. They are just better able to live closer to a neurotypical life and be successful in a neurotypical setting. So we like that better because then we have to do less support in the education setting. But we don't want to use that term light, right? Because this is how people are. We don't want to force people to mask. We're coming off of work. We want to take off our masks and be our true selves.
I don't know what to say, but if you met, we've done it the end of the day. So it comes with a high cost to do so. So
Right.
if you work and mask the whole day, I'm going home after a long school day and I'm done. I can go to bed at 6.
And that's, I think, autism or otherwise, think of a setting where like you were there and you just really didn't want to be there, you didn't really fit in, like even if it's like, okay, I'm like the new kid walking into school on the first day, how much energy that takes to try and fit in a new setting. For some in our community, that's what they experience every day, coming to religious school, coming to Share Shabbat, coming to services, coming to Ryterband as soon as they walk in the door. That it takes enormous extra energy to do the things that the folk neurotypicals can do at the get-go. So with this little image and the traits I listed before of autism are highly overgeneralized. On the following pages is the text sheet that our speaker in the video compiled. So most of those are texts that she referenced in the video. She did use the Hebrew names of the books, mostly Shemot Exodus and Bamidbar Numbers. So what I would like you to do, and we've got, what, about 20-ish more minutes? Or thereabouts, is take about 10 minutes. I don't expect you to go through all the text, but to read a few with your table, or skip the text entirely and just go to something you heard in the video. And consider if you identify as like the more neurotypical, neuro average, use whatever term you want, what assumptions you might have made about Moses's experience based on how you perceive the world. And for those in the room, whether you're comfortable sharing at your table or not, that might be more in the neurospicy category, as we read this text or these texts with the lens of perhaps Moses had autism, what new meanings can that bring to the text? How might we understand some of those moments of conflict or tension, or even like the moment of crossing the Red Sea from that perspective of somebody who thinks and experiences the world different than ourselves? I want you to take about 5-10 minutes to do that. And at the end, I'll ask a few of you to share some gleanings.
Just a quick
Richard.
question. Do you know any percentages, how many people might be neurotypical versus neurodivergent?
So the question is, do I know any percentages on sort of how many would roughly fall in a neurotypical kind of more average thing versus neurodiverse? If it follows a standard bell curve, then you've got your standard deviations. So what is that? It's like 66, 85, 93, I think. So short answer is no, because I don't know that it would follow a normal bell curve. to try and find the research, and I'll stick this little tidbit in there about trying to justify my statement that I think there's more ADHD in the Jewish community than the greater community, is really difficult. Because, one, you then have to answer who's a Jew, and find somebody that's done the research that defines who's a Jew similar to me. I found some that looked at the rates of ADHD and autism and other things in Israel versus the rest of the world as kind of a like Jewish general population. Your challenge is within the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox populations, they are far less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD and autism because they don't seek out medical interventions for those diagnoses. And the emphasis on that we are created b'tselem Elohim, this is the way God wanted me to be, means I don't need to fix my autism if I have it. So why get diagnosed? Which is a really interesting way of looking at it, right? Like that's the goal for the rest of us, but it means if I'm not getting diagnosed, then I'm not in the statistics. So even like when you look at some of the research out of Israel and sort of try and separate out the more dati, religious from the chiloni, the secular, there's a vast difference. And the researcher, and that I looked up months and months ago, so I can't give you a source, basically said they don't think that there's that categorical of a difference in prevalence as much as there's a difference in seeking out medical intervention or care, that then when we go and look at these, if you've like signed off in my chart that like your stuff can be given to researchers of what that prevalence is, because it's not coded in electronic medical records. Yeah.
And there's like the cultural aspect if you're trying to like Israel versus other cultures based on like ADHD prevalence. You're going to have a hard time finding prevalence of neurodiversity in a specific group when it's a culture by that group for that group.
Well, and then the comment that I think I had made in a Torah study that I got some pushback on, and I'll try and explain this way with a microphone a little better, was that, and I said, I do think there is some research that gives either statistically significant evidence or at least compelling arguments that, and I'm going to look at ADHD in particular for the purpose of this statement, is more prevalent in the Jewish community. And then the offhand comment I made was that birds of feather flock together in the observation that the prevalence of ADHD and autism in the last few years of people that we have worked with towards conversion, which isn't to say that that's everybody we've worked with, is certainly high, feels higher than average. And what I've heard from some of those folks is when they come to services, or they come to a Torah study or into our congregation, and as you read the Talmud, my running joke, it was written by a bunch of ADHD rabbis that love to go like, ooh, squirrel, let's go down that rabbit hole. They feel seen when you come into congregations and it's like, oh, Torah, but like, let's talk about this thing that's mildly related to the Torah portion. They feel seen. When you go into a Catholic church and you start questioning the authority of the priest, you do not feel seen. You feel kicked out. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a difference in the cultures. The number of people neurodiverse, neurospicy or not, that are like, we can ask questions. I'm like, we're Jews, we love questions. So short answer, no. If I had to guess, like all of us, right? Like normal doesn't exist. There's nobody, if I go back to that, there is nobody that's gonna be a perfect circle around this. We're all a little neurospicy or neurospiky in our own ways. So if I want to give my profound answer to your question, I'm going with 100%. Prove me wrong. But so around your tables, and if you're at a table of like 2, I might suggest teaming up with another table. If you've got a lot of people around your table, feel free to break off into smaller groups. and this is where like our awareness of neurodiversity comes in. There are some of you that might be like, sweet, I'm at a table of 8 people, this is gonna be awesome. And there's probably some of you in the room that go, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to talk, there's 8 people at my table. So when I say around your tables, like, do what you need to do. If you're not feeling like talking to other people, or read through the text on your own, I don't care. Well, I do, in that I want you all to do this in a way that is comfortable for you. For those that identify more with the neurospicy aspect of things, if you are comfortable sharing that with your table, great. If you are not, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. It is about 11:04, I think I'm supposed to end at 11:15, so let's say 11:12-ish, we'll come back together, and then I'll not end at 11:15. What else is new?
So, I just have
I
to
will
say,
ask.
that
It's beautiful.
I
Seems like
identify.
Sure.
I have no neuro.
Neuroblend.
So neuro.
Neuroblend.
Neuro. So I hate her sitting. All of it's like they left me. I was and I just like, I mean, I sort of.
Definition two was expanded.
Yeah.
Over the last 20 or 30 years.
There you go.
It was very different when I started working with him.
It's like everyone has the capacity to be able to.
I'm much more limited, and I can understand.
Like the conversation
I
about
definitely
like,
believe
oh, what
that.
is
I
this?
can
And it's like the kick
But
down
what's
to the all,
nice
like, oh, you've experienced this, you
is
must
that
have done.
we're so
Like, you get this experience.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
What this means.
I like what she says, and
nobody
follows,
but sorry, they need help.
You know, we all-
And this is like sort of the
or
conversation.
somebody
Is it
who
more
an adult.
But I'm like, culturally, it's understanding
It's
what a
like
neurotypical person
that person
is in the
help.
American
And
context.
one thing
the
to say
white
it's diverse,
Protestant,
but it's like, yeah, okay.
And so it's like, there's no culture.
I just recently read at the end
To that in a way.
it wouldn't be right today because it has limited vision of what autistic who they are. But there are autistic and functional like everyone does. That's a real kind of, you know, yeah, it's not everyone. And that's, I'm
Motor coordination is part of it, but it's also.
you ever see those? Everything Moses does is a symbol of his learning. And it's like, you know, what a bunch of people start talking to me at once.
Right.
I don't consider myself the other person. I don't think I am.
We haven't gotten the book.
I'm just yelling at somebody.
Yeah,
you know.
Oh, yes, the default throughout.
I mean, I think it's a match.
Throughout the conversation, that's like not moving anyway at all.
But it's moving.
The very first one, I am a slow speech, slow, right? And I've been so much about that as a speech,
Right,
like,
and then some
it's
no, there's something exactly how some people talk, like either it's the let me distract my brain enough to be able to pay attention, or if I think more in picture, how I
God,
know,
wasn't
if I
somebody
draw
who was
what you're saying.
No, it's
Like, you were kind of beginning, like, talking about, like, like doing it as sort of different learning styles. You're like, oh, this makes you strong, you can sit at and do it.
and you
Whereas like when I was growing up, I was thinking, but because, but doing that made every other facet of my life completely fall apart in a way that did that. And I was good at.
But and it's more of an exercise to express to what
meetings.
the
The amount of my brain that was like, sit still, don't, sit still, don't, sit still, stop tapping on the table. Like,
I mean, that's was
like, look like you're paying attention.
I'm sorry.
That now,
sitting on my
who cares? I've got to fit in, like, that I can be more present in the meeting, even though I look like I'm not more present in the meeting.
That's impressive, like, we've had this conversation, like, even if it was fully but we would always like, my brother would talk to us,
Yeah,
like, I
yes,
never
exactly.
had time to like, just go in the bell.
They get,
And my mom,
Yeah.
we have to be like, okay, so if it's 10:15, then that means there's like 26 minutes left in the class, which means there's 30% of the class period left. 56% of the day, and then the
There
other
are
that.
45 pages too late.
Yeah, and so it's like that calculation in the background. I would
That's
always
something
pay
that's
attention
that-
to the
that-
professor,
you know.
talking about, this is not a distraction, this is like.
It's perfect.
Experience starts with
I'll have to write it out.
It's almost like we're trying to take
someone who's difficult. Normal, you have.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's, there's an issue and appreciating the strength, strengths, really strengths of people who have well.
So like put words that are like definitions in one color, but key concept like. And his idea was so that then when you're studying, you can remember the page because you remember colors better than content.
Yeah, I mean.
Because I cannot see the page, but it still helps because
One
I'm
of the
like
things I found.
attaching the fact that things are green or red or blue still helps me remember, even if I can't see them as green, red, or blue.
See, I respect that, like idealize, but actually taking notes, if you see
And
any,
let you
like,
all continue.
I can't do, like, it's like the amount of work that it would take me to like, get the green pen instead of the red pen, instead of that, it doesn't work, I can't do it. I'm like, you ever seen my notes, I'll have like, all the being come on, like all my binders from college, like, this is notes from Intro to Judaism, immediately followed by my middle studies class. Which is great, the fun thing, like, oh yes, this is Zionism, it's defined in Intro to Judaism, and this is Zionism, this is.
So it's, one of the things that happens to me is people really don't know what they're doing. But
Yes, that's what is fully a joke.
So they take about 3 more minutes.
I can deal with more complex problems than
Just
this.
half of my day.
They don't intimidate me because I'm dealing with it all the time.
We just neurotypical yourself in the simple right back into us.
I think that's great. That's not the same. It's like, we're not necessarily, and we're not. Stops us from sharing. When you talk about mastery, it's like, when I think of mastery, our daughter Tammy was blind. Okay. When one of the things we taught her to do was that when somebody is talking to us, you look in their direction. Now, obviously, she can't see them. They know she can't see them. But people feel more comfortable to somebody who's facing them. So that's masculine. That's like, as if she were somebody. I think that helps you get along in society.
It's also a method of communicating. I am listening.
Yes. Yeah, but one that wouldn't have come to her naturally, obviously it didn't make any difference to her whether she was looking at the person or not. But, so it's
We're giving you.
She was not a person.
function in society.
And then there's a way
I remember one that I worked
just to be
so
very
very little
parents.
Oh, absolutely.
And like the babies, that can be pretty
Right. And it's not as
That's the way I like working with babies, that there's zero.
No, and that's the great thing about kids.
Up to my point. I mean, somebody's gonna be able to learn some children. And it seems like
I understand,
but
this is
the
not
thing is,
about
it's
this.
still,
This is domesticated.
but it's, you can, function and still have this, a difficult way of approaching problems.
No, I think there's certain personalities that do that for kids because that ability to just
But I think the example that you gave about Moses, so many of them, when they said,
dignity or whatever.
I don't know if that's the right word. Done some of those things that sometimes. That she labeled as autistic behavior.
I was kind of distracted hearing that video because I don't know if you thought this at all, Rich, but I'm like, son, is neurodivergent. Because of his extreme focus on certain things, and he's a rule follower, you know, just some really kind of rigid stuff that he was. He was a lawyer.
He is a lawyer.
Yeah.
I do, no problem.
Yeah.
Very good at
And he was a good student, you know, but I was like, and then I thought, no, that's true, where did you get it from? It's just fascinating.
The path, taking the path to be a lawyer, sort of give him the incentive to emphasize those traits.
Well, but you know, he was a RA in college, you know, again, rule, follow the rules, you know, so I think that he gravitated towards things that he was all as a kid. I was looking back on some files or whatever, and I found some notes from preschool, and the teacher was like, you know, Dylan's a really smart kid and he knows all the rules. One of the problems is he's always telling the other kids the rules.
So the thing with kids is like, you cannot distract a kid. If he decides he's gonna do something, he's gonna do it. If he's very determined and he will do it, and he will do it until it's 61. This is an amazing trait to have in a child, especially a little boy, especially in the era.
I don't like speaking in front of
It just can't
I
be
don't like
crawling
being
on
put
top of
in
the
front
shelves.
Yep.
Potentially crawling into the
All
ground.
those years I lived in New York, I didn't go down to you know, Times Square on New Year's Eve. That would be, that was hell. Oh, that would be a terrible notion.
We didn't get into hard.
Wow, that was great.
We visited that.
What did I
considered that.
felt that Isaac was learning his and he said it's interesting. And I thought about it, what this would be, but it doesn't necessarily mean I think that was the right thing.
And he actually was like, he felt like Kalamazoo and Whispers.
Well, not necessarily in
And he's
other
like,
ways, you know, it's, I think it's an interesting
so
exercise,
why not go to Whispers?
but it's,
Well, that's why we want to do that.
Yeah, it's like the first one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we got mine.
yes. Yep, I agree with you.
I don't need any of
Yeah, I think we all have weird neurodivergent traits, and some of, you know.
It's like, I like this image of the circle.
Yeah.
You can see like the space.
Sometimes you can find, you know, you can use that to help.
So
yourself
curious if there's still
establish
conversation
a
happening at every table, I'm gonna bring it back
Some
in,
cases it makes people have.
which just means you're gonna continue your conversations later. Or you're gonna continue them in a whisper now. Is there anybody on behalf of themselves, their group, their table, that would like to share a few insights, questions, clarifications? Insert noun here. Rich Cohen, you are being voluntold.
What you just said, what you just said.
I just said, if you are passionate and understanding of my neurodivergent tendencies, I will be compassionate and understanding of yours.
Right, so what I hear Rich saying is it sort of goes both ways, that being open and compassionate about how other people are different from us, they also need to be compassionate and understanding of how we function as an individual as well.
Isn't that all, well, that's called peace.
Yes.
Situation.
Others, Wendy.
I want to thank all of the people at my table who could tell me about what's going on now, because with grown children and children who grew up in a time when these conversations were either very new or not happening, even if the information was out there. I appreciate knowing more about how things are now. One question I had for the group is, given that there's more support and in schools and for helping students, if they're neurodiverse, surely the goal isn't to try to change them into acting some other way. And I understand that certain groups try to teach children to mask more. But that doesn't seem to be in the spirit of what we've been talking about.
So to summarize what I heard Wendy saying was gratitude to the group that has school-age children, given that she doesn't, explaining what's going on now, and kind of the tension between teaching kids to mask so that they can function in, quote, the real world, and teaching the rest of the world to embrace them as they are. And so I'm gonna share a personal story here, with the preface that I love and respect my mother dearly. And I've already told you Danny has an ADHD diagnosis. And so when we started Danielle in behavioral therapy and behavioral therapy, and we were sort of debating, does she need a 529 plan? 529s being like IEPs. IEPs are individualized education plans where if and I'm probably not going to get this precisely accurate, where if a child basically is not capable of meeting grade level standards, it creates an individualized curricular goals for that child. A 529 plan is in essence based on legislation where it's for students who need modifications, but not to the curriculum. So if my reading is a little bit slower, I might need extra time on a test, but I can still pass the same test as my peers. If I have severe ADHD, I might not be able to take the test in the same room as my peers. I might need that quiet little room without distractions. I might need somebody to translate the test for me. I might need somebody to read the directions aloud or to answer the test verbally or that kind of thing. But ultimately, I'm still showing the same content knowledge. I'm just showing it in a different way. I have not yet created a 529 plan for Danielle because at least through this point, her teachers and her schools have been incredible at giving her the support she needs without it needing to go through the wonderful bureaucracy of creating that plan. But that does exist for essentially as a protection for students to get the supports they need without it being like you're getting docked participation points in class because you're too anxious to raise your hand and answer a question. Yeah, that was me. But so my mom said, oh, so what? Like you're gonna get this 529 plan and the diagnosis just so, you know, she can get through school, but like she's still gonna need to be able to function in the real world. She's gonna have to be able to sit at her desk someday and do a full-time job. I can't tell you the last time I sat at my desk for 8 hours a day without wiggling around or getting up and doing things. There is a reason I don't have a 9-to-5 office job. And so that's part of this, right? Like the working assumption is not, you're gonna need to be able to function sitting in a cubicle, doing the same thing day in and day out. I've heard from some that being like an ER nurse or doctor is like the most awesome thing for somebody with like that kind of neurodiversity. Literally every day, every page is a new challenge. And you've got others that are sort of the checks and balances, making sure you didn't drop the ball on something. So in part it's the recognition that you don't have to fit the mold. There's lots of molds out there to aspire to. But there is still that tension, right? So for me, having Danielle in behavioral therapy is helping her build those coping skills. In the video, you heard her saying Moses didn't have those coping skills. Like, no, God forgot to give him the side lesson on how to pretend to be normal. To give her those coping skills so that she can be in a room with a lot of, and get overstimulated and either build more of a tolerance to mask or be in that room, or to know when this is getting to be too much, I am dysregulated, I need to step out. And this is why I love that in the last year, and I'm gonna do a call out to Big Meal Slice Loft here, that we've been trying to put together this sensory room where multiple of our students have been able to, at a certain point in the religious school day, either themselves or their teacher or a madri can say, you need a break. They can go to the sensory room, they can go take a lap of the wing, and then go back to class. And in my mind, the goal is to create a classroom session where everybody's engaged and nobody's getting overwhelmed. I don't know that we'll ever reach that because we have so many unique kids. But so we have that as a support for the kids. We have fidgets in every classroom. We have flexible seating in Hebrew because apparently sitting at desk for Hebrew just is not conducive to Hebrew learning. Who knew? But sitting on the floor, like, that's totally cool. There was no such thing as floor seating after kindergarten when I went to school. So yeah, there's more supports out there. And it makes the job of a teacher harder because you're trying to do more, you're trying to juggle more, you're trying to make sure the kids are using the floor seating to be helpful and not to goof around. For one of our kids, last school year, one of our teachers said, I just want to let you know this happened. So-and-so took class from the closet today. Not in a metaphorical sense, in a literal sense, the child was sitting in the classroom closet with the door almost entirely closed for a large chunk of class. And this child participated more today than any other day. And more positively today than any other day, because that child just needed that sense of safety and security, and nobody can come in my personal space and I can talk loud enough to still hear you, right? Then explaining this to the child in the closet sounds like a whole different conversation, but we have had children lay on the floor with their feet on the chair, pretending the room's been turned 90 degrees. And you know what? If it's not distracting others to a point that it's impacting their learning and it's helping you out, because literally being in touch with the ground is giving you that grounding that you need, great, we can do that here. And so for a lot of our students, there's things they can do here on Sundays that they cannot do Monday to Friday during the week. And that is one of the joys of having a smaller religious school. We've got the space to do it. Does that sort of address Carol, I think I see.
I think I and many at the table here just feel that to read so many of these things into the Torah that's not there, what's in the words, that's the way it was written, and to try to retrofit is pushing too hard without not diminishing the fact that there are a lot of individuals who do need extra help. And those of us who've been in a classroom know that each one of our students learns it a little differently. You have to explain it a little differently. If they jiggle a little lot, that's okay, depending on the teacher who will allow it. If they fall asleep in class, that's okay, they're not bothering you. I know teachers who couldn't stand that when my son fell asleep in class, and yet he was the A student. So I think, at least I'm having a lot of trouble trying to put it back into the Torah, not saying things like this don't exist and people need help, but to retrofit what we are reading.
I think there's something, I think I know what you're saying, is that the phrasing of, and this is how Moses is autistic, is a lot more, there's a lot more natural pushback to, if you were to phrase it, this is a way that Moses means something special to me as an autistic person. It's probably a better framing that doesn't have that pushback immediately if you're trying to like armchair diagnose a character of the Torah, you know?
And that's where, and I go to you in a second. So because y'all weren't on mic, what I heard Carol saying is it feels a little forced to try and retrofit this lens onto the Torah. Masena offered some wording that we could have used in the speaker in the YouTube video, and or I could have used that might have made it a little easier to chew on. And we're not trying to armchair, and that's at the beginning where I said, I'm not trying to armchair diagnose Moses or prove or disprove the statement that clearly, for the sake of the sources I brought you, that Moses had or did not have autism. There was no DSM in biblical times. So it is a very modern look on a biblical community. From my perspective, if we make the assumption, and you can agree or disagree with me there, that ADHD, autism, all of these ways of being in the world existed in more or less the same prevalence as today. And some of you will nod along and be like, okay, great, Rabbi, and others of you will be like, but our world's different, and trust me, like TV is meant to not enhance our attention spans. So it probably not exact, but my working assumption is it's close. That if we assume a certain subset of that 600,000 Jewish men of military age that came out of Egypt that I just read in the Torah on Friday, had ADHD or would be able to be diagnosed with autism, whether Moses was one of them or not, I assume autism existed in the biblical community. I also work from the assumption that the Bible and the biblical authors did not have that terminology, whether through B'Tselem Elohim and all of the other reasons that we can get to as to why this is important. That mentality, I think, existed and goes back to the comment I made on autism being less prevalently diagnosed in the ultra-Orthodox community. There's no medicine to fix autism. We're not trying to fix any of this. So what is the point in getting an autism diagnosis?
For us, for the person who has.
Understand where they're coming.
And I actually briefly had this conversation with my doctor as a side tangent on like ADHD and some other stuff. She pondered like why are there so many adults seeking adult autism diagnoses? Because what is it gonna change? You are who you are. There's no medication. You can go do therapy. You can go get the supports, build the coping skills. You don't need the diagnosis for that. It's more relevant, I think, in school-age children because the diagnosis is what qualifies you to get the 529s, the IEPs. There's far more of a reason to have the label. Speaking with somebody who was autistic, what I heard was the label also, right? Like, I don't necessarily go up to somebody and say, you know, hi, I'm Tina Sobo, I'm a rabbi, or hi, I'm Tina Sobo, I'm a Jew. Like here, you all know that, but like at Kroger, right? I don't introduce myself at the PTA meetings with my Jewish hat on. In the same way, somebody who has autism doesn't necessarily come up to you and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I have autism. But when they communicate, I have autism, it's a way of saying, this is roughly how I experience our relationship in the world, so that you now have that information in our interactions. And if I need to give further clarification about how my autism affects this relationship, then I can offer that clarification, but that the label gives information. Another reason for the label that I've heard from those that embrace some of the labels they have is, there's a saying that if you hear hoof steps, think horses, not zebras. If the world assumes we are all horses, and I am a zebra, I am the other. If I am a zebra, at least I know I am a normal zebra. And I can stop trying to be a horse. And then we realize we're all zebras in our own way. Some of us just have more stripes than others. And I think that goes back to if I have a lot of zebra stripes, it's harder to pass as a horse. But is the goal to pass as a horse or to pass as ourselves? And when we stop trying to make all of our students horses, when we stop trying to make ourselves into a horse, we can be more real and honest with each other. So back to Carol's initial point, was Moses a horse or a zebra? Or how zebra was Moses? Who knows? The real question, I think, is to what extent are we, there's a phrase, exegesis, which is taking meaning out of the text. So for example, that's, during the week, I know I'm preaching on Shabbat and I open up and I read the Torah portion and it's like, what's speaking to us this week? What looks interesting? What meaning can I find in the text? That's exegesis. Eisegesis is reading meaning into the text, which is what I think, Carol, you were getting at, which is to say, it's the Torah portion and, I don't know, I know I'm speaking about neurodiversity this weekend at Temple, like maybe our Torah portion says something about this. At the beginning, I used a reference to all the little minutiae details of building the tabernacle because it fit the purpose of this talk. I think for us, as long as a rabbi, I'm doing a balance of the eisegesis and the exegesis, of reading the text for the text and reading the text with an agenda, with a lens, we're okay. There are those that are gonna say we need to do a lot less eisegesis and just let the text speak for itself. Drasha, midrash, dalet reshin, that root, anybody know what it means? To demand. So when we do midrash, we're demanding something of the text. It is that notion of we are literally pulling something out of the text that isn't necessarily in the text. So we've been doing this all along. At least since midrash as a literary style existed. So for me, that gives justification for doing what we did today with the Moses text. That is not the only way to read the text. That is not the way I would always read the text. It was intended to give a little bit of a playground to use this lens to try it out versus mine just saying like, here's a way of looking at the Torah. All right, go enjoy your bakes. Megan, you had your hand up, right? Did I respond what you were going to say? Would you like to add?
Yeah. It's basically turn and turn again. It's just another way of turning.
If I go back to, I think this is where I was, right, yeah. So we have the tradition of studying of 70 faces of Torah. And so the short way of responding to that is this lens could be one of those 70. In the same way that the Torah queries class could be one of those 70. The Heart of Torah could be one of those 70. The Black Torah commentary is one of those 70. The new Torah commentary, when it eventually comes out, could be one of those 70. But it's still one of the 70. There are plenty of those 70 that I don't like looking at. They don't resonate with me, they resonate with other people, and it's great that they exist. So this lens may be one that you say, well, that was interesting for a Sunday morning. This is gonna go find the circular file. And that is okay. As long as you put up with my eccentricities. And there may be others around the table that are like, this exists? Like, tell me more, and you're gonna go home and you're gonna scan those QR codes and look through everything else. It'll take you about an hour to watch the videos. And I'd be happy to continue that conversation. Where are we? We're at 11:37, so I have roughly 8 minutes to be teaching Hebrew. What other questions, comments do you all have? Danielle?
Lots of thoughts, but I think regardless of how we interpret this piece, it's important to remember that individuals with these identities have always existed around us. We just now live in a time where we're not forced to mask. The children aren't punished as they once were. The answer when I was growing up in the 90s was medication. Well, now we have therapy. We have the emphasis on professional development for the teachers, social emotional learning, and just that support. So it looks different. And I appreciate you, Rabbi, bringing this conversation here because we have to collectively work on learning more and breaking down the stigma because we're all in the room together. She said it, we're all zebras in one way or the next, right? So just thank you for that because there's always been that diversity. Whether or not it was Moses or not, you'll never know, but.
And zebras are way more fun than horses, just saying. So the last slide that I figured we weren't gonna have a lot of time with, but a few thoughts on practical strategies. This came more from an education standpoint, so like the parent and community collaboration is definitely more for those in educational settings. But teaching Torah in neurodiverse friendly ways, which we do here at Temple, whether you know it or not. But the multisensory learning, having fidget tools, alternative seating, movement breaks. I told you about how we do that in religious school. When we do Torah study on Zoom, right? Who does Torah study on Zoom on Saturdays, at least on occasion, yeah? We all know there's a few participants that like their camera's off because they're on a walk. We all know Fran is gonna be knitting or spinning yarn, right? Just throwing that out there as people that have like owned what they're doing that helps them participate. Alexandria is not here this morning because she works on Sundays, but she helped me create the Sacred Stitching Group that was essentially founded on let's put our anxious energy and our need to fidget to a mitzvah. And since we started that group, I have seen more knitting and crocheting in services, in Talmud, in Dora study. I have not yet, maybe y'all are complaining and just not telling me, I have not yet heard from one person that it is a distraction or it has changed how they participate by having more yarn stuff going on at things. We made a few bags of hats and scarves. I have an entire basket plus a baggie of hats that are gonna go to Kettering for newborns and NICU babies. I can tell you more about that another time. But so normalizing those things in our spaces that I thought was awesome. I could stand here and joke that it means I get paid to crochet for like the every other, like once a month that I actually get in there with them and crochet during the workday. But we've been able to do good with stuff that people were already doing, and that's helping them participate more fully in our congregation. And I went to CCAR this past week, and I had a stroke of genius. About a week before CCAR, I posted in our group and I said, hey, this is a thing our congregation is doing. I know I've seen some of you all doing stuff during sessions at CCAR. Like if you want to make a hat and get it to me, like I'll add it to our stash. I had one person take me up on it. It's a very adorable little hat. So it's like, oh, well, that was kind of a bust. Except that I had, I think it was 3 or 4 different conversations with people that serve in congregations around the country about that program and how we got it started and what we do and just how amazing, even though they didn't do it at CCAR, that if I were a betting person, at least 1 or 2 other congregations may start, will eventually start similar groups because of that one post. That gave this oh, our people knit and crochet, and to me, that was a huge win of making a few other places a little more friendly to those that this helps them function, and not even function, that helps them participate with a little bit less masking in larger group settings. We've got the sensory room. We have the ability at high holidays, right? We're in here, but we pump the video and the audio into the sanctuary for those that need more space because when we're coming back from COVID, didn't want to be near each other, or need more space because they have little kids that might be distracting, and a little bit harder to wrangle them in the big room. They're welcome in the big room, just to be clear. Or you can live stream from home, right? That we try to give those supports to allow people to participate in their own ways. And as the last piece on this would be more if I was talking to religious school teachers or the religious school parents, but being partners in that. And I mean, I joke and say nobody's complained to me about the knitting and crocheting going on in other spaces. If that's a distraction to you, I want to hear that. If there's something else we can be doing, especially if it's a very simple, a lot of these things are very simple. It was not, okay, yeah, it cost a chunk of money to get the floor shading for Hebrew, but really not that much in the grand scheme of Temple's budget. And one ask, I got 2 more floor pillows from a daycare teacher that wasn't using them in their classroom anymore because it was too hard to sanitize them. Well, we don't need to sanitize pillows between weeks because like they're not going to college. So sometimes just simply putting these things out there helps make it happen. Where am I? I have 30 seconds. Anybody got a 30-second or less question? If you've got a 30-second or more question or follow-up, you know how to find me. Thank you all. Thank you for entertaining my good study in room.